Literally, as I'm writing this, I'm hearing footsteps on my front porch. It's 4 a.m. and no one should be out there. But you've got me bent if you think I'm going to check to see who or what it is. They're just pacing back and forth from where the steps to get on the porch are, to right outside my window, and even banging on the wall right beside my bed. My family and I have been experiencing paranormal things heavily for I think 3 days now, and we did before, but they stopped for around 3 months and have just started up again. So for the past few months, my boyfriend and I have started living alone together in a house we previously lived in, but with his grandmother. She moved out when we had our son, so now just us and our 3-month-old. It started before she left though. We're surrounded by woods on every side, the backside being the thickest, and the two on either side of the house being thin, and you can actually see through them in the fall and winter. Neighbours on all sides, most being family, but to the back it's a long gravel driveway that leads to I think 3 different houses, so still probably half a mile or a mile of woods in that direction. Anyway, we heard a whistling sound in the woods. Not like what you're thinking, but an actual human whistle. And it didn't really seem too scary at first. We assumed it was some crackhead or someone walking or something, but then it started bouncing from being heard on the left side of the woods to directly in front of the houses in the patch of woods, then back and forth, and occasionally to the right of the house, moving inhumanly fast, never stopping. We heard that only at night and every night for at least 2 weeks, then on random nights scattered here and there. Boyfriend was actually convinced that it was someone messing around on our property. So one night, when the whistle was closer to the house than normal, he loaded a gun, got a flashlight, and went to investigate while I stayed on the porch of the bigger of the 2 houses on the land, closer to where the whistle was at that moment. He walked to the tree line and said something to the effect of, "Whoever's out there needs to leave, or I'll shoot," just in case it was some of his family that lives around us, messing around in the woods. He said he heard something rustle the leaves on the ground, too close for comfort, so he shot at the ground in front of him to try and scare it or them off. And immediately after the whistle stopped. We heard it on different nights down the line, but never that close after that, and started to notice that if it was silent outside and we talked about the whistle, it would appear. I started joking that it was a skinwalker trying to scare him. No clue what it actually was. Not sure how long after, boyfriend and I were in the bigger house on the land in the kitchen, about to walk to the front door and leave to come back to our house. There's a hallway connected to the kitchen as you walk out to the right, and straight ahead is the living room and front door. I'm walking behind him, and as we're walking out, I pass the hallway to the right and am facing the door back to the kitchen now. My face and right eye was sort of covered by hair, so my view was obstructed, but I saw someone beside me in the hallway. And it was normal for boyfriend's mom, who lives in that house, to wake up randomly and take her dogs out during the night, especially when we were over there making noise. So I figured it was his mom, although all I saw out of the corner of my eye was a dark figure about my height. It was too late for me to move out of the way, since I was already halfway past the hallway mid-step, so I didn't have time to avoid bumping into her. I felt myself bump into her and brush against her shirt. After I passed, I turned to apologise to her, but when I turned around, there was no one there. The house was mostly dark and everyone was asleep. So naturally, I grabbed the back of my boyfriend's shirt and pushed him and said, "Go, now!" And we ran back to our house. When I told him, he said he didn't see anything there when he passed that spot. Then I had our son and his grandmother move out. Maybe on the 2nd or 3rd morning, being alone in the house, we wake up and he tells me how he woke up in the middle of the night to some almost dramatic laughter. He didn't say where the sound was coming from, but he said it was a man's voice. I can ask more about what he heard if needed. I didn't really believe him out of my own fear, but I told him it must have been scary and tried to comfort him. 2 nights later, he was off work and was going to get up with the baby that night. So we had switched spots in bed so I could sleep on the side I like that's up against a wall. I don't know what time it was, but I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a man laughing hysterically. Sounded exactly like at the end of the Thriller music video, when Vincent Price laughs creepily, but in a different voice, and went on for much longer. So being half asleep, I turn over to tell my boyfriend to be quiet or he'll wake the baby. But boyfriend is dead asleep. Baby is dead asleep. I can still hear the laughing, so this jars me almost fully awake, and I sit up and now realise the laughing sounds like it's coming from right outside the wall, beside our bed, which means whatever it was had to be outside, either right at the wall or at the window above our bed. But you got me bent if you think I'm checking to see who's laughing at probably 3 or 4 a.m, so I just went back to sleep. Whistling and laughing have stopped since winter came, but have been replaced by creaking in the loft of our house that we stayed in while his grandma still lived here, as if someone is moving around up there. I can see into the loft from the bed and couch. It's a tiny house, and I've never seen anything up there. But 3 days ago, I heard the creaking again, and looked up there from the couch, but of course found nothing. Looked around the house because I was alone and freaked out. Still nothing. Go to the door and flip on the porch light and look out the curtain. Again, nothing. But just as I'm about to turn around to sit back down on the couch, something touches my arm, so I spin around, scared out of my mind, as to what or who I'll see when I do, and nothing. Later that night, I have to pick up boyfriend from work, so I'm driving along on this bumpy back road at 9 p.m, because I refuse to take the interstate, and I come up on this sharp curve in the road. The road is fairly new to me, so it surprises me as I hit my brakes and look in my rear view to see if there's any cars behind me about to rear-end me, or for just randomly slamming on my brakes, and I see a whole figure of a man in my back seat against the glow of my tail lights. I look at the road because I need to turn, or I'm going to wreck, and when I look back, he's gone. I rushed to my boyfriend's job, got out of the car, and waited for him because fuck that. Next night, I'm home alone again, while my boyfriend is at work, and start to hear creaking in the loft. I'm scared, so I start recording to see if there's anything and hopefully show myself there's nothing to be afraid of. I record the whole house back and forth a few times, and in the video, there's nothing in the loft for the first time. But when I come back, that's when I see a face. A white aura looking thing at least. I start praying and getting my things together to go to the other house to wait for my boyfriend. But my robe is in the bathroom, which is under the loft. But I rush to get it anyway. As I'm walking out, I'm looking up there and hear someone step onto one of the steps, but see nothing. These steps make a very distinct noise when stepped on because they're 2x4s. I just ran. I tell them what happened, we go back home, and we're sitting in our living room talking about it, when I hear something upstairs. Then our front door slowly creaks open on its own. We went and talked to his parents, and they said to ignore it, give it no power, etc. But his dad was a priest, so he goes over and blesses the house, and says everything is okay now, and that we can go back to sleep over there at their house if we're scared. We end up sleeping in our house, and the only weird thing I can remember from that night is that as I was awake late, which is a normal thing because I have insomnia, like maybe around 2 or 3 a.m. while everyone else was asleep, and I heard a tapping on the wall right next to me on my left. My son sleeps in a thing that swings and it does make a rhythmic clicking, but this was much different and much louder, but very much in sync with the swing and directly by my head outside the wall. Swing would click, then a loud tap, back and forth for around 3 minutes, and then stopped. This would have been the last night, I believe, but I was up again alone while everyone was sleeping. I was in bed next to my boyfriend, and our son in his swing by the stairs. All of a sudden, I hear what sounds like a broom falling onto another broom, like two pieces of thin, hollow metal clinking together, towards the kitchen area so loud that I jump and get scared and wake my boyfriend up to investigate, but there was nothing that had fallen at all. This morning, the door opened on its own again and we heard a few creaks upstairs, but nothing major. Now tonight, boyfriend was walking from his mom's to our house and swears he heard the breathing of someone running behind him, very close. No footsteps or leaves or anything, just breathing. I heard him scream when it happened, and a second later, he rushed in, locked the door, and told me what happened. We stayed inside most of the night. Now I'm rewriting all this because when I started writing it, I was hearing footsteps on my porch pacing back and forth, then a loud bang on the same wall right beside me. At one point, it sounded like it was on the roof above me. Then I heard someone take a few deep breaths right beside me, as if they're inside the wall or sitting right beside me on the bed. I tried to wake my boyfriend up, but he's exhausted today, so he doesn't want to wake up, and I'm terrified. I don't know what's fucking with us, but I want it to stop. If anyone has any ideas about what's going on, I'd love to hear it. Any ideas on how to get this shit to go away? Also, I have the video of the face or whatever, but I didn't want to post it because the house is still being worked on, and the walls are still just sheetrock with plaster all over them, but I guess I need to. By the way, it's 5:30 a.m. as I'm finishing writing this, and the footsteps have stopped for now. Okay, so this happened this morning around 6:50 a.m. I was getting prepared for school and I got my clothes ready. My dad comes in and tells me that he's going to drop off my mom at her job and he'll come back to pick me up. I say okay and shut my door and lock it since I need to change into my school clothes. I hear my mom and dad walk out of the house and close the front entrance door. About 10 minutes go by and I'm fixing my hair in my room, the door's still locked. I suddenly hear the door handle in my room shake and turn rapidly, as if someone is trying to get in. The whole door started to shake as well. I immediately ran to open the door thinking it was my dad and found no one there. My dog then starts to bark in my direction, and she rarely barks. I stand there for about 2 minutes trying to process what just happened. And then I hear my dad unlock the front entrance door and he walks inside. Before I could say anything, he asked me, "Are you ready yet?" I chose not to tell him what happened, since he was mad and I wasn't ready to go. I've always seen paranormal things that can't be explained. The first part was while my family and I lived in England. When I was about 12, I would get woken up by a little girl in an old-fashioned pink dress. She always puts her finger to her lips to gesture for me to be quiet. This went on nightly for about a month. Last night it happened. She did her usual finger to the lips gesture to be quiet, but this time she gestured for me to cover my eyes. Dumbfounded, I did as she gestured, but being curious, I peeked from under my covers. I saw her standing outside my door, standing next to the window, just outside it, and she had a look of fright on her face. The next thing I know, she takes a quick glance at me before I see an arm grab and shove her out of the window. Terrified, I quickly covered my face, and shortly after, I fell back to sleep. I mentioned it to my stepdad, who was very curious about what happened. He did some research about our house to find out that there were no deaths in our house prior to us moving in, and before it was built, it was just farmland. Fast forward 16 years in the USA. Here, just a few months ago, in our new house. My stepdad and I are living in the living room, watching TV, and my 2 children, daughter 5 and son 7, we're playing in my son's bedroom. I had walked into our kitchen to warm up my coffee in the microwave. From where my stepdad was sitting, He had a perfect view down the hallway, where the bedrooms are and the microwave in the kitchen. Upon returning to the living room, the atmosphere felt a little different, and the look of fright and worry on my stepdad's face was as if he saw a ghost. I'd ask him if everything was okay. It took him a few minutes to answer, as if he was trying to rationalise what had just happened. He'd walked into the kitchen and I followed him and asked himself if he was okay. He told me that he watched my daughter walk into my room, was inside for a few minutes talking to whom he thought was herself, to find me wearing all the clothes that I had on for that day, following close behind her. He could see me in the kitchen in front of the microwave and me walking up the hallway at the same time. He said he thought he was seeing things, but couldn't help keep looking between me and me to make sure. We heard the kids approaching, so I told him to wait a minute as I didn't want to talk about it in front of them. What my daughter said when she came into the kitchen was very eerie. With a straight face, she looks at me and says, "Mommy, you're funny as a ghost." My stepdad and I exchanged looks of what the fuck. I'd asked her to repeat what she said. "You're funny as a ghost." I have no idea what to make of it. Is this some entity approaching the children looking like me to seem less frightening for them? Or something more sinister? Or is it a guardian angel interacting with them looking like me to seem more familiar? I do not believe in ghosts or the paranormal. I've never experienced it. I've always been able to debunk it. I'm extremely hesitant to even admit this because I don't believe that's what's happening to myself. But lately, I got pretty spooked in my apartment. I don't know what it is, but there must be a rational explanation, right? Whenever I would enter a room or turn on a light, I would see a black thing scurry and hide. I thought maybe it was an animal, a bug, or some dog fur since my dogs have been shedding like crazy. But whenever I searched for it, or tried to focus my eyes on it when I see it moving, it's just gone. The closest thing I could compare it to is the suit sprites from My Neighbor Totoro. This went on for a few weeks before I mentioned it to my partner. They stopped and immediately looked at me to see if I was joking. They're a big believer in the paranormal, but know how I feel about it, so they don't often admit their experiences to me. But I came to them with this, and they were shocked. They've been seeing it too. They described exactly what I've been seeing. We've lived in this apartment for 2 years now, and only recently we started seeing this. It's freaking me out, but there must be a logical explanation, right? I was also in the bathroom last week, and it was clear that day that I had heard my partner outside the door and called me. I called back asking what they wanted, but suddenly they were much farther away and sounded confused. They had been in the bedroom the whole time and hadn't heard anything, nor did they call me at all. This could have been the TV, even though it was much closer and louder than the TV. I don't know. Since that experience, we have a cat toy that we bought months ago, but the sound was broken and hadn't made a single sound. All of a sudden, no movement, no touching it. It started this garbled noise non-stop for the past week. It won't stop making this noise, and nothing even triggered it. My partner and I moved into this flat at the end of last January. It's a fairly new flat, part of a block of flats. First thing we noticed after a few weeks in the fridge, brand new, beeping insistently at night and changing temperature on its own, as if someone is pressing the buttons. It would stay silent all day and stop beeping at night, or be quiet for weeks and suddenly start beeping when one of us was in the room. We dismissed it as faulty item. Then we had the toaster being found plugged in the morning and hot as hell, while we were both positive it had been unplugged the night before. We moved the toaster on top of the fridge when not in use. Shoes started falling from the shoe rack in the middle of the night, same as the toilet paper holder. Google Nest came to life in the bedroom while no one was there and played an Italian song I've never heard. I'm originally from Italy. While the activity log read unknown voice said play my favourite song, that freaked the shit out of us. We had the Xbox and the TV turning on and stuff on their own. I lost a t-shirt, Alice in Chains' last tour t-shirt, pretty particular, during laundry. As I was going through all the clothes coming out of the dryer, I found some long male underwear, which neither I nor my boyfriend had ever seen before. We literally went over every single nook of the flat looking for that t-shirt. No luck. 2 months later, my boyfriend is doing his laundry and surprise, the t-shirt pops out of the dryer like nothing ever happened. Fresh as fuck. Last thing, 2 nights ago, we were on the couch watching a movie, each at the corner, and a voice could clearly be heard in between us. I think I heard a laugh. My partner says it was more like, hello. Each of us turned to watch the other, but none of us had spoken. We're pretty freaked out by now, but still dismissing everything as coincidences, as we're pretty rational people. Also, he keeps on having nightmares about ghosts haunting the flat, and he woke me up screaming more than once. What do you think? Should we be worried? Thanks in advance for any advice. I had a dog growing up. His name was Charlie. Charlie was a mutt, pit, and German Shepherd mix, and some other stuff. He was very willful and prone to occasional violence with the other dog, Sam. But for the most part, he was a good dog, even though he ate the arm off my dad's recliner chair and just claimed it as his own. The dog chewed everything: shoes, sticks, rocks. He also loved to get out of the yard, a poorly fenced 1-acre woodland lot. But because of his aggression problems and his wanderlust, he wore a pretty heavy chain around his neck with a bell and reflectors attached. Anyway, because he chewed everything, my mother bought a supposedly unchewable plastic bone thing for him. First of all, fuck whatever company made that thing, because Charlie had no problem chewing through it and swallowing pieces of it. A piece he swallowed ended up rupturing his intestine, and surgery would have been $6,000 at a predicted success rate of 20%. We didn't have that. Mom took him in and had him put down. Dad buried him in the yard. 10 days later or so, it was me, my brother, and my dad, all up late, just talking, not much going on. Then we all heard it, and we all looked at each other. It was unmistakable. All at once, we all heard the click-clack of Charlie's claws on the deck, and the jingling of his chain, and the tiny little jingle bell. It sounded 100% like Charlie was asking to come in. Dad got up, went to the door, and opened it. Nothing was there on the porch. But Dad just stood there with the door fully open for a good 10 seconds, standing off to the side as one would when letting a dog inside. He saw that we were confused and said, "Just want to make sure Charlie got all the way back in." And that was the end of it. Never heard from him again. The only other thing of note here is my dad did not like dogs or cats until we got Charlie, and Charlie promptly ate his very expensive chair. In some weird way, my dad respected that. Don't ask me why, because I'd need to ask him, and sadly, that's not possible. 3 people, myself included, all heard it at once and knew immediately what the sounds were. The closest neighbouring house was a half-mile away, and our driveway was steep and long, so any noise was cause for alert. It was a very quiet place. Anyway, that's the story of when Charlie came back inside for the last time. I have wondered in recent years whether a house actually has the capability of being positive or negative towards its inhabitants. We've rented the same house since 2010. The house is over 60 years old, and for most of that time has been used as a rental. The current landlord has owned it for well over 20 years. When we moved in 2010, we were grateful for the chance at renting what was a perfect situation for us. The second night we were here, the yard light came on. When I told the landlord this, he was flabbergasted, as there isn't even a breaker for this light and hasn't worked in years. This light stayed on constantly for 4 years until the bulb finally burned out. We had been here for a few months and all kinds of activity occurred, but none of it was malevolent. As we have spirits that accompany us, thus we put it down to some of those, but there were other things that we didn't seen before. A few months after moving in, I talked to the landlord and asked him if he had heard whether the house was haunted. He's a rather open-minded fellow and replied that no, he hadn't heard that. But he has had an instance of a couple renting the house, and they had no issues before moving in. But shortly after, there was all sorts of fighting and some domestic violence, which resulted in the police being called at times. Eventually, the landlord was forced to evict the couple. After leaving the house, the couple returned to a state of domestic bliss. I put it down to the house not liking the couple. Or it might have been the energies attached who had put it in for these people. I really have no idea. What do you think? I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. Furthermore, my dad lived in the oldest house in the town, which was around 150 years old when I was in high school, and I stayed there overnight once a week. I shared a room with my half-brother, who rarely slept there. My bed was against a wall that was connected to the upstairs hallway, where all the bedrooms were. There were a few weird things about the house, but the weirdest parts were in my room. Above the fireplace, again, a really old house, so there were fireplaces in most rooms. We found that the wood boards were loose and easily came out. There was a small compartment where we found some old knickknacks, but nothing too crazy. The other odd thing was there was a metal door knocker that you'd see on the front door houses hanging on the door. I never thought anything of these when I chose the room to stay in, but it should have been a red flag. With the house being so old, my family would joke about the house being haunted, like anybody would. You'd get the usual creepy sounds that an old house would have, but there was something off about my room. With my bed against the wall to the hallway, I could hear people walking up and down the hall. It wasn't a weird thing until I noticed that almost every night there would be footsteps pacing up and down the hall. I would bring it up to my family, asking who was awake and things of that nature, but nobody ever said it was them. I tried a few times to get up and open the door to see who was walking, and there would never be anyone there. If that wasn't enough, when I finally decided I was just imagining these noises, I started to hear someone using the knocker on my door. I'd respond with a hello or who's there, but never got a response. Again, I thought it was someone messing with me, but when I brought it up, everyone thought I was just being crazy. After it happened 4 or 5 times, I finally decided to get up and look who it was. When I opened the door, there was nobody there, and I didn't hear any footsteps of people running away. This is when I decided something was really going on in the house. A couple of weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I rolled over, eyes still closed, to face the other bed in the room. There seemed to be a light on in the room which didn't make sense, so I opened my eyes. What I saw sent chills down my spine. There was an older man sitting on the corner of the bed closest to me, in what looked like a sailor's outfit. He had a weird green tint to him, and he was looking right at me. Being a school night, I decided to just turn back the other way, close my eyes, and forget I ever saw it. I fell back asleep to the thought running through my head, you didn't see anything, you didn't see anything. The next morning, I told my family about what happened. They were obviously skeptical, but it did give more credence to my other mentions of noises I'd hear throughout the night. To this day, I don't know what I saw, but my dad moved out of the house shortly after. It still seems weird that I was the only one to experience something like this in the house, but I do know I believe in ghosts. Back when I was around 19, my good friend and roommate and I decided to pass some time by playing the Ouija board. I believed he didn't. Initially, anyway. What was meant to be fun actually turned into a 9-month drawn-out haunting. But there was one funny and creepy moment I can still laugh about. The entity we spoke with called himself Fred. I'm wildly into anything paranormal and welcome it, which I know isn't good. I try to be logical and am pretty skeptical. I would have believed it was my friend moving the planchets, even if subconsciously, if it wasn't for the other things happening. On to the funny thing I want to share. One Friday night, I got home from work super late. My roommate also got home late and we were debating on going out or staying in. He suggested we ask Fred. So we pull out the board and ask, should we go out tonight, Fred? The board went to yes, then spelled out, live a little. We laughed and it spelled out, because I can't. When talking with Fred, it always also spelled out ha-ha after jokes. Immediately after spelling out ha-ha, my friend's favourite jacket he wore when going out fell randomly from within his closet. We were amused, but decided against going out. As soon as we said that out loud, my radio turned on by itself, full blast, playing a song from a joke I got from another friend. It was the song Out Tonight from the musical Rent. It both scared us and made us laugh. Just thought I'd share that, as that came up again tonight with my old roommate.